officially 6:30. Shall we get going? Okay, so it is 6:30. Let us resume. And first, we have to come out of our closed meeting. You have the motion to certify?
I do. I move that the city council members certify by a recorded vote that, excuse me, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Second?
Okay. Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote, please?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. So we're back in session for our 6:30 session. First, we'll begin the 6:30 business meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Councilors, any announcements? Any items for recognition? We don't have any proclamations. So let's move on then to the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, you want to present?
I have one thing I would like to
Okay.
say.
Sorry.
I would like to thank our city staff for putting on the 25th anniversary grand illumination on
Yes.
Friday. Regretfully, I was unable to be there as my duties as a parent came first. But I heard reports of it being a lovely time, and I know staff worked very hard on that with not a huge budget or a whole lot of assistance, and just wanted to send my thanks and appreciation.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a great event, and a couple of us got to hang out by the bouncy house for the kids, and
Yeah.
that was definitely very exciting.
Their energy is contagious.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that's the only thing that was contagious. Okay, Ms. Thomas, would you like to read the consent agenda, please?
Number 3, minutes, October 17th meeting. 4, resolution, approving and appropriating grant funds for the Virginia Department of Educational Special Nutrition Program, Child and Adult Care Food Program, $50,000, second reading. 5, resolution, considering a special use permit request for 901 Seminole Trail and 1801 Hydraulic Road, one reading. 6, resolution, considering a special use permit request at 211 Albemarle Street, one reading.
We will now take public comment regarding those 4 items on the consent agenda that were just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. In the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you are joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, you may press *9. We'll alternate in-person and virtual as speakers. And this is only for those items if you want to speak on anything else on the agenda, or if you are one of if you're the pre-registered speaker, your time will come in a minute. On those 4 items, anybody who wishes to speak on those items? Anybody in the room here? No? Anybody online?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
All right. So is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
Any further questions or comments from council? Ms. Thomas, will you please take the vote?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Mr. Rogers, is there a report from the city manager's office?
We normally give the full city manager's report for the first meeting of the month. We will not do that tonight. We've been working the staff very hard, so they looked at me and said, "Not this time, buddy." And so we'll be back with the full report in the second meeting. There are a couple of items, though. You had, Mayor, written us about an item today that I asked Sam to follow up on. Samuel? Mr. Sanders?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. So this update is in regards to some transportation items that have come in. We've had a series of inquiries, proposals, and ideas shared with us to focus on some various public infrastructure improvements. And I wanted to acknowledge some of those as the high-spirited support and rapid-fire reminders have come in. Some a little bit harder to keep track of, but ideally wanted to just try to tick off a few of those just to make the public aware that we are aware of the interests, we are aware of the various ideas. We're working on trying to bring some order and organization to some of those things. So I'm going to quickly run through that just to share that with you as a part of what our current process is for just trying to get our arms around where we stand today. In regards to Stribling, the sidewalk project that is to accompany the Southern Development Project is it's not moving with the vigor that we anticipated at this moment because there was a lawsuit filed against the city for the financial instrument that we're planning to use. We hope that that will be resolved as a legal matter at some point in the first quarter of next year. But in the meantime, the city is still working internally on figuring out the various things that we need to do to make sure that once that matter is resolved, we are full steam ahead. The goal would be to ensure that we deliver as promised, that that project will come along, that sidewalk project will come along as the development project is coming along as well. So just wanted to give that as an update. In regards to JPA, just the JPA corridor, there are many, many different ideas of things that can be done. I honestly don't think there is a proposed concept for JPA that we have not heard. There are a variety of projects in varying degrees of consideration. Some funded, some not funded. We have a lot to take a look at for that corridor specifically. We intend to continue to do that as a high traffic area. And there's some organization of possibilities that still needs to happen internally because we have a long list of various things that can be done at different intersections along JPA. But at this moment, they're not organized, they're not coordinated. And I think that's something that we could work to do in the short run. More recently, we've been asked to take a look at possibly doing dedicated bike lanes along West Main Street. We're not ready to consider alternate ideas for West Main, having just officially canceled that project on the books. We are currently still working with VDOT. As early as this morning, we had a meeting with VDOT, basically concluding this intensive work that we've been doing since late spring. Once we are in full alignment with VDOT, which we hope is going to be concluded in the first quarter of 2023 with the State Transportation Board taking action on our various requests, we'll be able to come back and take a look at West Main for some potential reconsiderations. There's even a possibility that there may be some local match funds that then would be available to possibly do something like this. But I caution everyone on thinking that that'll be the case because I'm sure there will be other critical needs that will happen at the same time in the portfolio that we might need to use that cash for. And then East High Street has also been one that has commanded a lot of attention. At the start of school, council allocated $500,000 in ARP funds for Safe Routes to Schools work that we were prioritizing with the expansion of walking routes. We are currently reconciling that budget and have intentions of bringing a report to council as you are considering your surplus conversation, because as you might expect, I am asking you for more money. There's more work that needs to be done, and we hope to be able to get that information out to you in advance of that particular meeting so that you then can participate in any questions. CAT has already moved the bus stop in that section to prevent some of the ongoing traffic concerns with people going around the bus through the parking lot at Jack and Jill. It has been temporarily moved to prevent that from being the result of a bus being stopped on East High. It's in a temporary position at this time. Once the sidewalk is done, it will be installed permanently. The sidewalk will go in front of the AT&T building. It is just the stretch in front of the AT&T building that we prioritize as a part of the Safe Routes efforts. The area in front of Jack and Jill's and Charlottesville Glass and Mirror is not a part of that sidewalk project. That can only be addressed in a larger project, a larger transformation project for East High, and that is a larger project that we currently do not have funding for. But we do have it as a high priority in the Streets That Work plan, and that's some of the ongoing work that has to be done. That work will get done by our new transportation planner, Ben Chambers, who's been on the job for 30 days. Now that he knows where the bathroom is, he's going to get to work on helping us figure out how to get everything done that we need to get done and organizing all these various priorities and forming some additional recommendations on how we can tackle these projects. So I just offer that to you all as an update, as I know you have experienced the barrage of messages coming and going. I have been trying to order them and keep them organized and keep conversations going. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but at this moment, it's about capacity, and I just need a little time to ensure that we can get our arms around everything and figure out what is the best and appropriate way to move forward. That is my report.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I reported at the last council meeting that we were undertaking a community survey to kind of find out what our citizens think of our services and what their priorities are. We have an update on that. Ashley, you have an update?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The National Community Survey has been administered to random households in the community for the data-driven part of this program. NCS is actually very excited because we've received the most response numbers for the National Community Survey that they've seen for quite some time. For households who've received this, if you have not yet either completed the survey online using the link that you were provided or turned it in paper, please do so. We really would love to have your input. For the full open participation of the community, that survey link will open online on December 7th. We will make sure that we provide communications through our social media and other channels so that people will be aware of being able to fill that out. And we really do look forward to hearing from the community. One note, when you go to fill out that form, it will ask you for your zip code and your email. The city will not have access to any of that data, but it's asked to make sure that individuals from the community are who's answering the survey, so we can make sure we're really getting our community members' responses, not someone in California, for example. So they're asking not, again, to keep any data. We won't receive any of that data, but it's so that they can make sure the person lives, works, and plays here in our community to really be able to get their perspective. If you have, again, though, received a mailed link to a survey or a paper survey, please use that one and not the one that will start being posted on December 7th. Mr. Rogers, that ends my update on this particular survey tool.
So this information will be another layer that will go into our strategic plan. And I'm pleased to report that we received 7 proposals for a consultant to do the strategic plan for us, and we are sorting through those. We should have an award made in the next week or so, so that we can launch our effort in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Questions, comments from councilors?
I just really appreciate that update from Mr. Sanders on the sidewalks and other street improvements that we're trying to make. I know that is, those are one of the things that we, in terms of the volume of emails and responses that we get from people, are almost always at the top. So thank you for that, and for the new person that you have hired. I'm really encouraged to hear that we have that individual on our staff.
Yeah, just quickly, Sam, if you could email me or us that quick report, because I know I'll get some questions on it, so thank you.
And the new employee is going to have all those answers for us by next week.
Yeah, right.
Welcome aboard.
You won't get the answers next week. I will definitely forward my notes, and I plan to drop that into the full city manager's report at the second meeting so the public will have access to it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we come to community matters. We have 1 pre-registered speaker, meaning there are 15 slots for additional speakers on community matters. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. We'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Is our first speaker available? Ms. Fraley is standing up already.
Mayor Snook,
Hi, I'm Kate
Oh,
Fraley.
Hold on a second.
before we start, the timer is not syncing, so I will put the beep sound on for
Okay.
the 3-minute mark.
All right.
Thank you. So I'm Kate Fraley. I'm a city resident, and I realize I probably haven't been here in 3 years in this spot. So it feels good. I wish it was filled with people. I want to say about two things. One is I'm so grateful to Mr. Mendez and the PCOB for all their hard work, and I hope that you move swiftly on the resolution and the ordinance tonight. I understand there's a second reading, but they've worked really, really hard, and it'll be wonderful to have those things in place and be able to move forward. Thank you very much. The second thing is I'm very concerned about the lack of people who are prepared to provide mental health services. And with the Marcus Alert coming in all its forms all over the state, I think that maybe you could spend some of the surplus on scholarships and trainings and certifications, and also in supporting organizations that have to do the supervision of the people who have taken classes but need some hours. I was really glad to see in the legislative agenda for the city many, many places that mental health is included, and I would just like you to insert regularly in all of them, including funds for training, education, and internships. So that would be in F4, in J3, 5, 7, and 9. And by the way, 7 and 9 in J look a lot alike. The other thing is, you know, when you take the police away from the hospital, years ago, there was a program at the hospital where peer support personnel did that. I've been looking it up, and I know somebody who was involved in some of the training for those people, and those people were paid, I think, by the hospital. But then I don't know why it went away. But it's been done before, even in our community. So whatever money you can get to teach people, we're closing beds because there's no staff. So we need to grow them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraley.
I beat the beat?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. So, to fill the remaining speaker slots, virtual attendees wishing to speak may select the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak during community matters, please press star 9. In-person attendees may raise your hands to be recognized, and we will alternate with virtual speakers. There will be an additional public comment section at the end of the meeting. Do we have anybody else in council chambers who wishes to speak in the public during community matters? Seeing no one, is there anyone online who wishes to speak in community matters?
Yes, Mayor Snook, John Hosick has his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Hosick?
You are on with council.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to talk about the Mount View Baptist Church. I have several objections. First of all, I think that the entire process undermines the need for the rezoning ordinance. It would appear that you can pretty much do whatever you like, wherever, under the current zoning regulations. So it kind of undermines the rationale for the ordinance, and in particular, it's dispiriting that it will eliminate public process, making things which are currently by public process by right. I'd like to point out also traffic issues, unsafe entrance off of 250, overloaded River Vista, and many traffic safety deficiencies in this neighborhood. I think some of you are familiar with those. I would suggest that you address these before imposing more traffic on the neighborhood. You've had 70 years to address things such as the two-way ramps on 250, and it's long past time these were addressed. These have resulted in many accidents and near-death experiences. The traffic report was written by the developer and therefore considered to be conflicted. The developer has a poor reputation being associated with questionable issues with respect to remapping of the floodplain. The buildings are in proportion to adjacent housings. There's an element of bait and switch, in my opinion. So 3.4 acres sold as having 72 units, and the green space is calculated using that number, so it would appear. In fact, there are 60 units on 2 acres, and there's very little evidence that there's any interest in going with the further 1.4 acres. So it looks like you're taking advantage of one acreage for one purpose and then something else somewhere else. Anonymous LLCs, 2 anonymous LLCs at least were involved in buying adjacent properties. These were then consolidated. People in medium-intensity residential, as an example, are concerned about this because this allows for, in the process going forward, people acquiring adjacent lots pretty much invisible and then consolidating them, which may enable the transition from uneconomic and technically unfeasible projects to being feasible. One more point. The developer actually suggested that this development was actually compatible with general residential, so that should wake up a lot of people in this town, even in those in general residential, because he calculated that when you 3 units on a eighth of an acre lot, then that would equate to 24 units per acre. So you know this kind of density, this kind of structure, it should be alarming. It also shows you how the developer will go to the limits of the allowances in terms of setbacks, etc. So that when we see these setback defined in the zoning ordinance, then we should be alarmed. The Planning Commission recommended rejection of the plan, so minor changes were made. I suggest that you either reject it or defer it. I'd also like to draw attention to an appalling lack of notice for this zoning hearing. I only learned about it because I subscribed to an email from Sean Tubbs. There's no notice to neighbours about today's meeting, and it was only public notice, maybe 2 business days. Only 3 councillors were present at the Planning Commission, and I'm fearful that tonight you're going to change your mind effectively, and will do that without any substantial public process.
Mr. Housick, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is there anyone present in the room who would like to speak in community matters? Yes, sir. A new arrival.
Good evening. James Groves, city resident. I'm here to advocate for elimination of natural gas subsidies. I thank several of you for responding to my earlier comments. Here's my reply. You wondered whether the city has the power to eliminate these subsidies. First, city code does not say Charlottesville must install gas lines for free, only that it may, indicating discretionary power. Second, remember, before 1979, local gas customers paid for line installations. Third, the city's gas utility is not regulated by the State Corporation Commission. Rather, ours is locally controlled. The website for the American Public Gas Association, of which Charlottesville is a member, states, quote, public gas systems are regulated by their consumer owners through locally elected governing boards or appointed officials. This form of governance takes place at the ballot box and by participation in city council and utility board meetings. These boards most often have authority over rates, unquote. Next, you expressed concern about whether eliminating subsidies might hurt low-income residents. First, recognize that tasks performed at home by natural gas can be accomplished with electricity. Thus, gas infrastructure is redundant and costly. Second, a national study has shown that building an all-electric home is less expensive than a mixed-fuel home with gas, regardless of location. For example, when a mixed-fuel home might have a gas furnace and an electric air conditioner, an all-electric home can heat and cool with one heat pump system. Nationally, others are phasing out gas subsidies. California will eliminate its subsidies next year, with the commissioner stating, quote, our current policy of subsidizing natural gas line extensions is a vestige of the past, unquote. Elsewhere, Oregon has begun to reduce its subsidy year by year. Colorado has proposed subsidy elimination. You expressed concern about climate change in Bangladesh. This issue is much more. It's about caring for all life on Earth, including here in Charlottesville. Acknowledge our contributions to the climate emergency. Understand our future, including local impacts, may be borne by young people already in our midst. Subsidy elimination is the first of 1,000 steps to address climate change. 50 years ago, 90% of our energy came from fossil fuels. Today, that percentage is 80. To address climate change, we must reduce our dependence to net zero in the next 50 years. 90 to 80 in the past 50, 80 to 0 in the next 50.
Mr. Groves,
Move
your time is
faster
up.
and start eliminating gas subsidies now. The power is yours.
Thank you. Is there anyone online who wishes to speak to us next?
Next up, we have Stuart Walton.
Mr. Walton?
You are on with council.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to speak on the Mountain View Baptist Church development. A few things that I'd like to touch on. This has been extremely rushed. We were given notices early on to discuss as a neighborhood in the surrounding areas. And then it's not been brought to our attention, such as this meeting, when it would be addressed. It's been left very open-ended. I feel very deceived given the local feedback that either requested changes in the sizing of it or parking or traffic situation that comes with this development. I think it was done for a reason, that they're trying to expedite this without letting the neighborhood know. The traffic study was done by the engineering company. I feel that that's very biased. You are all elected officials by the city, and I feel like I would request that you listen to what the Charlottesville residents are saying, and that this is an unsafe development. I think it's a good use of the land, but the entrances and exits to the development are very unsafe. I live right next to where the road is going to be put in, connecting it to River Vista. It literally runs through my yard. There's been issues where the grade is unsafe per city regulations, but that's been overlooked, and that was stated by the Planning Commission. That there's a special exception. Safety is at hand of the residents and my child who's right next door to this road. I don't think we can make exceptions. I feel like I would request that you guys defer this to a later date until the changes that have been made to this development are fairly and adequately explained to the neighbors. And there's just there's people have spoke up at previous Planning Commission meetings when it was voted to reject it before it went to you all. And there's people on St. Clair, on River Vista, our cars get ran into. One blatant thing that the traffic study was completely false about was that people only park on one side of River Vista. I can tell you right now, there's at least a dozen cars on both sides, and it's like that at all points in the day, every day. So the fact that the traffic study is completely incorrect should be looked at before this is voted for. I mean, there is safety at hand of the residents, and I don't see how this can be voted in as it currently stands. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Anyone else in the room here who would like to speak to council? Okay. Anybody else online?
Yes, Mayor Snook, we have Chris Meyer.
Right, Mr. Meyer?
You are on with council.
Good evening, councilors, and I hope you all are having a good month, holiday month. I'd like to say our family participated in the illumination events on Friday. It was good to see many of you there, and it was a lovely event. I'd also like to give a shout out, I guess, to someone in your building inspection department. Charles Miller recently assisted myself with getting an inspection and a permit done, and was quite flexible, and I found it a very different experience than I thought I was going to have. So kudos to that hire, and I think Mr. Miller is doing a great job there so far. I would like to since you're going to be discussing the budget coming up, hit on a couple of things that I've spoken to you many times about, but want to make sure are getting addressed. One is that the Buford renovation budget is moving forward, that they're getting the cost estimates finished, and that I hope that we'll see a bid out early spring, and so that we can know that the final number amount is approved and moves forward, and we don't have to delay this project any further. Linked to that, I do hope that you consider using some of the surplus money from last budget that might be coming forward to cover some of the maybe probable cost increases in that budget because of building inflation, and that we don't value engineer all of it. And one thing that I am considering, at least for my own children who are in elementary school and will be going into the middle school, is the auditorium, and making sure that we also remodel the auditorium at Buford and not set that aside. Finally, I'd like to note, and I think Dr. Groves spoke about this earlier, around our Charlottesville gas utility. There was a municipality, actually the largest county in Maryland, that recently basically had a new ban on gas installations of appliances. So it's not just a couple of us in the city that are concerned about it and doing about it, but there is a precedent in other municipalities near us that are taking action to address their climate change mitigation, and especially through their gas. I do hope that the study that is done in January, I think, on decarbonizing fossil gas is shows us some pathways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Anybody next online?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
All right, so that was our final speaker for Community Matters. There will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. We will now move to the action items portion of the agenda. First, Mr. Engel, Mr. Sanders on the City-County Courts Memorandum of Agreement and the lease.
Good evening again. I'm going to take the first part of this, and then Chris Engel is going to dig deeper into the details. Just want to kind of set the table for this particular item in regards to City-County Courts Amendment to an existing agreement in regards to the General District Court. The city and the county entered into an agreement to build and keep the GDC downtown. That original agreement was signed in 2018. It called for a 100-space parking garage to be constructed by the city. Council later decided not to proceed with that garage, which triggered the backup clause for providing those same spaces in the Market Street parking garage. Staff assessment proved that would be problematic, and deliberations began for looking to identify an alternative. Tonight, we are presenting the tool that we have developed. We've been working closely with our counterparts in the county. We feel strongly that we do have good agreement in this matter. The first action that we need to take is to amend the original agreement that provides for the parking arrangement, and then there's a lease document of those terms of that parking arrangement. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who will go into the details of that agreement. But before Chris begins, I just want to confirm up front, because I know it'll pose questions later, this agreement does not, I repeat, it does not impact the Lucky 7 or Guadalajara. That will be dealt with in any future decisions that will come to council, and council will be a part of making those decisions. So Chris, you can go ahead and give us the details of the parking.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Essentially, the agreement uses a combination of the Market Street parking garage and the city-owned surface lot, which is referred to as East Market Street parking lot in the agreement, but is actually addressed at 701 East Market Street. This is a 63-space surface lot that the city and county used to own jointly since about 2004. And then when this agreement took place in 2018, one of the first elements was for the city to become the full owner of it. And that did occur prior to the cancellation of the parking garage project. So in essence, the county gets full access to 63 spaces at 701 East Market Street, 5 days a week during court hours for use for staff and court visitors for court business. They will handle any enforcement. We will maintain the basic parking lot as it is, and the lease kind of spells out those elements as well. So they get the use of the 63 space lot. They also get the use of up to 27 spaces at Market Street that are undesignated, meaning first come, first serve, whatever's available. And those will be administered via the current validation system that is in place throughout the downtown, whereby visitors pull a ticket upon entry and then are given a validation ticket when they leave. And those will be provided free of charge to the county, but we will be able to track them in up to 27 spaces per day for the length of the court day, which is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So essentially, those two elements combine to make a operational agreement that works from the city side, and it solves the need for parking on the county side related to the courts. As Sam mentioned, this item is scheduled for a public hearing today. It's a 2-reading ordinance, and if you have any questions, we're happy to try and answer them, but that's a quick overall summary.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. So, any clarifying questions from council at this point?
I think it's a good resolution to, where the city was, so
Okay.
thanks staff for working it out.
We have to have a public hearing yet, so if there are no other clarifying questions or comments, I'll now open the public hearing. Mr. Dillahunt, we're ready for the first speaker. Is there any speaker online who would wish to address this?
Yes, Mayor Snook. Rory Stolzenberg has raised his hand.
All right.
Rory, you are on with council.
Good evening, council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just wanted to call in to congratulate staff in the city on reaching an amicable agreement here and to say thanks, staff, for all your hard work on achieving this good outcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone present in the room here who would like to address this issue? Okay. Anybody else online?
Mayor Snook, there are no additional hands.
All right, so no further speakers. The public hearing is now closed. The matter is now with council. With council, this is something it's only a first reading. We would need to continue it to the second reading next meeting. Is there an agreement to do so?
Totally in agreement with that, and would just echo the comment that thank you to staff. I know this has been hard to work on, but I think this is a tremendous victory for the city to not spend $10 to $15 million on a parking garage. We're not raising a minority-owned business and another affordable business on the mall, and have come to an acceptable resolution without doing those things, which I know a lot of people said was impossible for years, but it's done, and I'm very happy to see it and happy to have it on the consent agenda.
Yeah, I
Consent agenda,
agree.
people?
Yeah, I just want to second what's been said. This demonstrates, creativity and imagination and trying to find a solution that is really optimal. And so thanks to staff for sticking in there and getting us something that is, I think will be a good solution for the entire city and county.
I would also say we need to throw some kudos to the county for being willing to work with us to help us solve this problem together.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have agreement to carry it to the consent agenda next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
'Tis done. Thank you. This next issue, consent to the city manager's appointment of the chief of police. Mr. Rogers?
Mayor and council, I have included in the background memorandum a step-by-step citation of the process we went through to search for a new police chief, a process that started in May of 2022, but the intensity of it happened over the last several months after we received 5 candidates from our recruitment company, Polyhire. We conducted virtual interviews with the semifinalists using an in-house screening committee that consisted of my cabinet plus the chair of the Police Civilian Oversight Committee. We narrowed that down to 3, and we then conducted on-site, in-person interviews last Monday, the 28th. That committee was augmented with the vice chair of the PCOB. Each candidate was asked a series of questions based on what we saw from our initial surveys, online surveys, and stakeholder interviews that the citizens wanted in terms of characteristics of the new chief and the issues that they wanted a new chief to be prepared to deal with. After going through that process, we asked the PCOB to host a public forum for the candidates. We had a 2-hour forum at Carver Recreation Center on last Monday night. Had probably about 45, 50 people attending, and we live streamed it. Then, of course, council had an opportunity to speak with the candidates through your virtual interviews. Through that process, and looking at the rating of the various committees of the various candidates, it became clear that one candidate stood above the others in terms of the rating, and that candidate was Michael Kachis, the current police chief of Warrenton, Virginia. So based on that, I am confident that Michael Kachis would make a great police chief for the city of Charlottesville. I've done some references on him with some of the community organizations that he's been engaged with. And it comes back glowing reports in terms of his approachability, his engagement and commitment to community, his steadfast approach to solving problems and building partnerships with the community. And that matches up very well with what we heard from the stakeholders in this community that they want to see in a new chief. So I submit Michael Kachis to you for your approval tonight. Thank you very much.
Councilors, are there any clarifying questions to Mr. Rogers?
No, sir.
I would just like to note, or maybe Mr. Rogers, you could be specific about some of the references that you did check.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I checked with the leader of the Black Lives Matters organization in Warrenton, the Baptist Church, large Baptist Church in Warrenton, and the NAACP. All three gave glowing reports about Mr. Koch's engagement with the community. And if you can believe this, there was a certain passion that these people felt about this man and his approach. And that's something that every public servant would really be pleased to have other people say about them in terms of their engagement with them. So I'm very comfortable with this recommendation. And after your vote, there's, I think Mr. Kachis is online.
Right. So,
Go ahead. Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Charlottesville, Virginia, pursuant to Section 20.2 of the City Code, that the city manager's appointment of Michael Kachis to the position of Charlottesville Police Chief is hereby approved by the City Council.
that's your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion, council?
No, I think this is something we've obviously discussed a lot. We've had the public forums, and I would just acknowledge, I think the path to reform is going to take a lot of time and community engagement, and trust is going to have to be earned. And on council, we're going to have to support that effort long-term, acknowledge where we've come up short. But I believe we can set out on that path.
I wanted to note a couple things. One is I was intrigued that Mr. Kachis had come to us after he said when he went to Warrenton, Warrenton had had 3 police chiefs in the prior 18 months. So there is some similarity to the situation here. It came into a situation of great instability and was able to bring stability. I actually got completely unbidden a letter from and a chance encounter with the mayor of Warrenton, who, although he said basically we will be sorry to lose him, but I want you to know how well respected he is, how they mentioned specifically the fact that one of his biggest supporters was the NAACP. And I also had a similar encounter with a former mayor of Warrenton, somebody else I knew, and heard from some law enforcement people, the phrase that they used was that he's the real deal. He has, in Warrenton, instituted a number of reforms. One particularly interesting program is what they call the 30 by 30 program, where they want to get the number of women officers in the department up to 30% by 2030. And he's making some progress with that. The point is that displays a commitment to reform that and to changing the character of policing in a way that I think is very important. All of the references that I checked when I went looking for other opinions and other information, all the information was very positive.
Yes, and I just want to add first, I'd like to really thank all of the candidates. From what I observed, we had 3 excellent choices, and that is a good thing right there. And I imagine, Mr. Rogers, difficult for you to make that final determination. We're very fortunate here in the city. I'm looking forward to the new leadership here. We desperately need that, and that's stability. The process was very thorough that we went through to get public input, and so looking forward to moving Charlottesville forward, and I think that Michael Coaches can take us there.
Yeah, I just want to second what others have said. I felt like the process was a good one. I appreciated all of the efforts of all of the folks who participated in it. I know that this is a weighty moment for the city, given where we've been in the past. One of the things that impressed me when I had a chance to meet Mr. Coaches was on Zoom, was the fact that the sense I got from him was that this was not like he was not mapping out his career path or anything like that. The sense I got was he wanted to be a part of Charlottesville's story, where we've been, where we are now, where we want to go. And that's the sort of police chief that I'm looking forward to for a substantial period of time, to really dig into Charlottesville, to get to know us and our story, to help us as we grow. And I got that sense from Mr. Coaches, and I'm very confident that that's where we're going to end up.
So, other comments?
I'm good. Everyone's already said everything I would say anyway, so we're all good.
Okay. Ms. Thomas, would you take the vote, please?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay. The motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Dillahunt, is Mr. Coaches available for appearance? There he is. Welcome.
Welcome.
Well, good
Hello, Ms.
evening,
Coaches.
Mr. Mayor and councilors and City Manager Rogers. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for and your staff for a very thoughtful and thorough process. I know a lot goes into that, and I really do appreciate the time that I spent with everyone and got to know people, and I look forward to getting to know people even closer. I really do appreciate the faith and confidence, council, that you have placed in me to lead the Charlottesville Police Department and the women and men of that organization. I know we have a lot of work to do, and I'm ready to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And do I understand that you'll be joining us January 16th or thereabouts?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, let me also say, offer our appreciation to Acting Chief Tito Tourette.
Yes.
During this period, he's been a stabilizing force. He's had some tough challenges, and we want to publicly thank him for what he's done, and we look forward to his future years' participation in the department and being a part of the path forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Very grateful for Acting Chief Durrett and his service.
So, thank you, Tito. Thank you, Chief Coaches. Okay, next item on our agenda is the Police Civilian Oversight Board A couple of matters. First is an ordinance to amending the ordinance. Mr. Mendez, are you going to present this to us?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. The items in front of you tonight, councilors, are the vast majority of the paper that you would have to read is the operating procedures. And they basically, as we can discuss in a little while, embody the various powers that the council gave to the board last year. The amendment that we have proposed, the amendment that the city attorney and our independent counsel approved and drafted for us, basically is a simplifying matter. In the old ordinance, it was not clear that the board had the authority to, after conducting an investigation of an incident, of actually then holding a hearing and going on to making findings. And so the new language simply makes the investigation of an incident analogous to the investigation of a complaint, so that they can follow the same path to decision-making by the board. That's the sum total of the change that's involved.
We'll come in a minute to the operating procedures, but solely on the question of the ordinance. Councilors have any questions for Mr. Mendez about the ordinance changes?
I don't. They seem straightforward and good to me.
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
I'd be happy to move to amend and reenact Chapter 2 Administration Article XV1 of the Police Civilian Review Board.
This is one of two readings, so
Never mind.
Can we move it to the December 19th meeting
Yes.
for the second
Yes.
reading on the consent agenda?
Can we, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that will be done. The other piece, though, is the operating procedures of, what, 50 pages, 60
Yeah,
pages?
well-
I don't remember how many it was.
A lot.
Now, at the pleasure of the council, I have, as usual, a little spiel. Otherwise, I can just answer. Okay, I'll do the little spiel. The document you have before you is a revised version of the operating procedures. They were originally submitted to the city council in April of this year. Over the course of their development, they have undergone extensive review and comment by stakeholders, as well as legal review by the city attorney and the board's independent counsel. The intent of the procedures is to implement the same review and investigative oversight model embodied in the enabling ordinance passed by the council last year, in a fashion that is consistent with existing law and sufficiently detailed to guide the actions of the board. To briefly review the important provisions, the procedures describe the structure and membership of the board, standards of conduct for board members, and they incorporate the police oversight code of ethics developed by NACOL, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Procedures for recruiting and selecting the board's executive director are spelled out, as are the director's powers and responsibilities in support of the board. The procedures implement the board's previously enabled powers to receive, investigate, and make findings regarding citizens' complaints, and to investigate and make findings related to incidents of potential misconduct that pass specified thresholds of severity. The board will also have the power to review the findings of internal affairs investigation if the complainant requests it, or if the board finds there is otherwise good reason to do so. After investigations of complaints or incidents, and in support of review requests, the board will have the authority to hold hearings to determine whether misconduct has occurred and whether an internal affairs investigation was complete and satisfactory. The recruitment, qualifications, and duties of the hearing examiners, who must preside at all hearings, are specified in much more detail, along with the order of the hearings, standards of conduct, standards of evidence, and findings that are available to the board. The procedures also specify the circumstances under which the board may meet to develop disciplinary recommendations in the case of serious misconduct. General principles governing board-initiated investigations are laid out. The first thing that our new executive director will have to do when he gets here is to write an investigation manual that will have to be approved by the city attorney and by our independent counsel. The duties of the executive director include initiating and managing investigation, procedures for engaging outside investigators if they are necessary, and the content of investigative reports. Similarly, a detailed planning process for board-initiated audits of police policies and procedures is described. Also, procedures governing the narrow circumstances under which the board may request subpoenas are described. Finally, the procedures define the nature of allegations which may be subject to voluntary mediation, procedures for selecting mediators, and conducting mediation sessions. I'd like to acknowledge the extensive input received from the stakeholders and the hard work put in by City Attorney Lisa Robertson and the board's counsel Pamela Berry in making sure the board's mission will pass legal muster. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. And I would also like to add my thanks both to Ms. Robertson and to Ms. O'Berry. This is the attempt, hopefully the successful attempt, to implement regulations that Mr. Mendez and I personally struggled over for some time about a year ago. And I'm glad that we could get those two folks to come to an agreement about what is not only would make sense, but also would be in the best interest of the city. The only issue that I've got, and I had sent an email with about 10 or 12 issues to you and to Ms. Robertson today, and some of them are changes that I think folks agree ought to be made. But the rest of council, I think I sent a copy late today to people. I don't know that I don't think there's any disagreement about what we're talking about, but I am always very apprehensive as a lawyer of asking somebody to sign something they haven't seen, or about asking a council to approve, to vote for something that they haven't seen the final language of. And I personally, particularly, there is one thing that may be a little bit different, and that's in the Code of Ethics. You had sent to us something late in the day that frankly, I've printed it off, but I still haven't had a chance to read it. And following my own dictum of I don't want anybody to vote for something they haven't read, I would like to ask that we take up the operating procedures at the next meeting when we also pass the statutory change. That will give us a chance to distribute the exact words that we will be voting on. We've already had the discussions about what the substance will be. I just don't feel good about asking folks to sign something we haven't actually finished.
Will the procedures require 2 hearings?
No.
Okay.
So they would both be enacted next time.
Okay.
Is that?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
As long as you CC me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, this would be continuing on the email thread that you and I had already established.
Okay, very good.
So let's continue it then to the next meeting in December, and we will take it up, hopefully no more than about 3 minutes to talk about it.
Great.
Okay?
That's fine with me, and we'll just say the substance of them seemed good to me, and I'm prepared to support.
Yeah. Just let's get the language right, and then we'll pass it.
Yeah, and thanks again for all your efforts with this, Mr. Mendez.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Next, we come to the zoning map amendment for the Mount View PUD. Carrie Rainey, City Planner, to present. Ms. Rainey?
Thank you, Mayor Snook. Carrie Rainey, City Planner with Neighborhood Development Services. Shimp Engineering, acting as the agent for the property owners, has submitted a rezoning application seeking to change the zoning classification of the subject properties from R2 2-family to PUD or planned unit development. The PUD development plan proposes up to 72 dwelling units at an approximate density of 22 dwelling units per acre. The area designated Block 1 will continue to house the Mount View Baptist Church and may include up to 12 dwelling units, daycare facilities, consumer service businesses, some retail uses, art studios, or outdoor parks. 60 multifamily residential units within 6 structures are currently proposed within Block 2. A joint public hearing was held at the September 13th Planning Commission meeting. The Commission's discussion focused on the proposed affordable housing proffer, including concerns with the duration of availability and specifications for qualifying residents, as well as general support for the proposed density and building form. The Planning Commission voted to recommend denial of the application. Members of the public who spoke during the public hearing voiced concerns with the quantity of residential units proposed, the increase in vehicular traffic, availability of parking, the lack of connection between blocks 1 and 2, potential architectural quality, and stormwater management facilities. Support was voiced for the proposed central green space and the proposal to provide multifamily residential units within a series of smaller buildings. Subsequent to the public hearing, the applicant submitted a modified PUD development plan and updated final proffer statement. The PUD development plan was modified to propose family day homes of 5 to 12 children to be permitted by a provisional use permit as is currently permitted in the R2 zone, and remove detail on the proposed improvements to Landonia Circle, as requirements for these improvements would be determined by Public Works during the site plan process. The proffer modifications are described in detail in the proffer modification cover letter provided in your agenda packet. Generally, the modifications to proffer 1 revise rent and income limits, extend the affordability period from 10 years to 20 years, incorporate marketing plan provisions, remove the 90-day limit on income restrictions, and revise the timeline for construction of affordable units relative to market rate units. The proffer modifications also include additional language within proffer 3 to provide the adjacent landowner with the option to maintain an existing fence in lieu of construction of a new fence. In addition to proffer 4 to complete the sidewalk gaps in the existing sidewalk network along River Vista Avenue connecting the property to St. Clair Avenue. The Office of Community Solutions has provided an analysis of the affordable housing proffer revisions, which is included in your agenda packet. In particular, the office noted a desire for a longer affordability period, and the office would like to consider changes to the affordable units if such changes are reasonable and would not result in the segregation of affordable units or a reduction in the size of affordable units. NDS staff is supportive of the modifications to proffer 3 regarding adjacent fencing and the addition of proffer 4 to fill in sidewalk gaps on River Vista Avenue, as it does improve pedestrian connectivity to the development. Mayor Snook, would you like me to present material on the related sidewalk waiver at this time, or wait until the completion of this zoning map amendment item?
Well, I will say, first of all, you were frozen for almost everything that you were saying, so if there was any visual content that we were supposed to be getting, we didn't get it. I think we heard most of the words said, but...
My apologies, I had no visual information up.
Right, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that you were trying to, if you were trying to give us hand signals or something, we didn't get them.
No, my apologies.
What do you want to talk about the sidewalk waiver at the same time, or?
So is the sidewalk?
I'd like to have them 2 separate things.
Okay, let's keep them separate then.
Okay, then I would just note also, that I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe Alex Ikafuna with the Office of Community Solutions is available, as well as the applicant team.
Thank you. So, councilors, do you have any questions for Ms. Rainey, first of all?
Yeah, I have a number of questions. So I went to the Planning Commission meeting where this was discussed, and even though it was recommended for denial, I think that was on narrow questions about affordability, and not narrow, but they're important. But in other words, it wasn't as if the Planning Commission was dead set against this project conceptually. Is that a fair statement?
I watched the video of the public hearing. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend due to a family emergency. But as I noted earlier, there was some discussion and general support for the proposed density and the building forms proposed, and so other elements as well.
Ms. Rainey, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if there's something wrong with your speaker or microphone.
Is this better if my camera's
Yes.
off?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, my apologies. I'm not sure why I'm having so much trouble.
Uh-huh, okay.
Should I repeat what I just said?
Yes, please.
Okay, absolutely. So, as I did note earlier, there was some discussion at Planning Commission about support for the proposed density and the building forms. But as the Councilor Higginson noted, there was concern focused on the affordable housing proffers, but otherwise there was some general positive discussion on the agenda.
Councilor Payne, does that match your recollection? I think you were there.
Yes, I was there. My recollection is similar. There were concerns about the affordability period as well as the affordability levels, as well as the specific wording of proffers, but not the overall density or building form.
And so there's some technicality here, Mr. Mayor, in terms of how we handle these modifications or amendments to the plan that's submitted post the Planning Commission.
My understanding, and if Ms. Robertson's on the call, maybe she can clarify. My understanding, she sent us a memo today. It basically said we had three choices, and one of the choices was if we felt that the changes were significant enough so that we would want to send it back to the Planning Commission to see what the Planning Commission thinks about it with those changes, that's one of our options. Is that fair to say, Ms. Robertson?
That's correct, yes.
Or if not, we can vote on what we are seeing here.
Or that we can go ahead and vote if we wish to, correct?
Yeah, yes.
So I think it's fair to say that this is a better application than what was in front of the Planning Commission in terms of the affordability components. Would y'all agree to that?
Yeah, and I was at that PC meeting as well, and I think it was just not that it was in a rush, but it was a timing thing that it will have to go back through, and that this addresses many of their concerns.
Yeah, and I had just a couple more specific questions. So there's the addition of sidewalk that's on River Vista. Maybe could we have the applicant step up at this point? Or
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Is the applicant with us? They're here in the room. Okay, good.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good
Welcome.
evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Kelsey Schlein. I'm a planner with Shimp Engineering. I also have Justin Shimp, engineer on the project, and Bryce Craig with Craig Builders.
Thank you
Here
very
with me
much.
today.
Yeah, so I noticed that one of the proffers that was added was I guess, essentially the portion of River Vista, let's see if I got this right, the south side of River Vista on the west portion of the new road that you're building. In other words, you're going to have, coming from St. Clair on the south side of River Vista, a new sidewalk built all the way from there to this new road that you're cutting into your property. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, there is
Okay.
approximately 270 linear feet on the south side of River Vista of sidewalk in front of two nearby properties that's incomplete. And so the revised proffer proposes the construction of that 270 linear feet of sidewalk, which would create a complete pedestrian connection from the site all the way to the nearest bus stop on St. Clair.
Right. And then there was the new road that you're constructing into your site. What is the name of it?
Well, it's only
It's a short.
it's only a portion of it is currently in the River Vista right-of-way. So it's about, I think, 50 or 70 feet of our entrance is within the River Vista right-of-way. Beyond that, it's just a private entrance.
Okay.
So there's no formal road name for the internal
And again,
entrance.
this is the one that comes from River Vista South.
Correct.
Okay. And so I know that you're also adding some multi-use trail on the south side of the development. Is that right? On Ladonia or?
Within the Otter Street
Otter
right of
Street,
way.
okay.
Correct. Yeah, proposal for a multi-use path there. Currently, 3 homes are accessed from Otter Street, which is, really effectively kind of functions as an alley. And so the proposal is just to create pedestrian, bike, scooter connectivity through there to build a multi-use path that wouldn't be accessible to vehicles. We could put bollards up or something like that to define the distinction between where the Otter Street access to the residences ends and the multi-use path begins.
Got it. And then I'm assuming y'all are still working out the engineering piece in terms of how you get out to 250, and I guess fire truck access and all of those things will still have to be resolved as part of the site plan approval. Is that right?
That's correct. And the final engineering and road design of any future improvements to Landonia Circle will all be sorted out at site plan.
Okay. And then the last thing I had was, I think it's this narrow new road, I'm calling it, but basically the entrance to your development on the north side. There had been some talk about a grade issue, like it was going to be difficult to build the road to make the grades match. Is that something you see as a technical challenge or fairly straightforward? Or maybe I'm thinking another part of the property. But.
Yeah, sure. So the concern over the max grade percentage is in Landonia Circle.
Okay.
So we're confident that we can work within the existing River Vista right-of-way that we have to work with to connect to our property, that we can meet the city grading standards at that portion. So the grading concern is actually in Landonia Circle, and the city has especially for the Piedmont region, has a fairly strict max grade. There are many roads in the city that are much steeper than 10%. So we're the grade issue is specific to Landonia, and that will be worked out at site plan. It's not for River Vista.
And is what you're describing right behind the Papa John's or the bank?
That's right behind Doodle's Diner.
Doodle's Diner.
Yep.
Okay. I said that was all of my questions. One more question has to do with the stormwater on your property.
Sure.
So are you doing like on-site storage, or is it going straight to the river, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, so we haven't fully fleshed out the stormwater design just yet. It's likely going to be some combination of on-site detention. Perhaps we'll have to do a level of on-site treatment as well. That just comes with the more detailed engineering once we have our final calculations for impervious surfaces.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, the only real concern I have about this development is just it just has to do with transportation and infrastructure in the northeast quadrant of our city. We're putting in two new developments on Park, Maca, and the Park Street Baptist in this, and I think all three are exceptional projects. On the other hand, and I'm not saying that we not move forward with this, but I do feel like that the folks in that neighborhood, which is our neighborhood, incidentally, there are real concerns about people coming south on 29 and taking Rio Road and cutting through Agnes and all of the strange ways people try to get around the hydraulic connection, the John Warner Parkway connection. Our road infrastructure is. I won't say it doesn't meet the capacity, because I can't say that, but there's the perception of a lot of cut-throughs happening in that area, and that this would simply drive it up. I would be interested in more detailed assessment from our our traffic engineer, if they have any sort of opinion they could weigh in on that. I'm not asking them to do that tonight, but that's just my only real reservation about this project.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would, since I understand the Planning Commission unanimously voted against this project, I would be much more comfortable with it going back to the Planning Commission with the various proffers to make sure that that is what they felt, and that they have a chance to sign off on that. I feel that that is one of the reasons we appoint people to that body, is that they represent the expertise. They're in that field, and I would prefer to vote on it after it has been back through them.
A few questions. First, to the Office of Community Solutions. I know you noted that staff would like to see a longer rental affordability period. Could you just comment on that?
Well, Good evening, councillors. The new proposal is much, much better than what was previously presented to the Planning Commission. And they doubled their affordability period from 10 to 20. And as always, you know, the affordable housing plan, depending on whether the city has funding in the project or not, we prefer a much longer affordability period, like 30 years and what have you. But in this case, there is no city funds going into that. But we still prefer a much longer affordability period. So that's why we put it in there.
And then what is the affordability period in the draft inclusionary zoning ordinance?
I think it's more than 20 years.
Yeah, my memory was 99 years.
I think it also depends on how the project is structured and whether the city has money in the project. And then also, I think if developers, whether the city has money in the project or not, and developers are proposing a profile in terms of affordable housing, they need to follow the provisions in the inclusionary zoning.
Mm. And I understand with the PUD, the density is 22 DUA. What would the density be under our current zoning that would be allowed?
That's a bit difficult to answer because the property is currently zoned R2, which generally allows single-family homes and duplexes, and so those are governed by a minimum lot size and also a minimum road frontage. So it sort of depends on if how someone might choose to lay out the site in terms of where a new road might go to get additional frontage and additional pieces in that way. So it's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison in that regard.
I'd be happy to hear your answer as well.
Yeah, sure. And so, yeah, as Carrie said, there's a lot of requirements that go, since it would be pursued as a subdivision under the R2 ordinance. I mean, and just kind of rough block-in layouts that we've done, high level, trying to meet all the city requirements. It's in the 16 to 18 unit range.
Mm-hmm. So I guess a question to staff is, would you say that it would be fair to say that approving this in part is based upon approving it based on the standards of our recently adopted future land use map?
I'm sorry, are you asking if this conforms with our future land use map?
Or if we would, correct, and part of the reason we would approve it is based on us evaluating that it conforms with that future land use map.
It does not specifically conform with the future land use map, which proposes general residential land use, which would be defined as, perhaps up to 4 units on a lot, generally smaller building sizes, not development in these size of buildings.
Thank you. And
but there are other components of the comprehensive plan that we noted at the point of public hearing that it does align with in terms of providing other potential benefits.
Mm-hmm. And final question to the applicant is, I know one of the reasons the Planning Commission recommended denial was because of the specific wording of proffers that they weren't comfortable with. What substantive changes have you made to the wording of the proffers?
Sure. So we worked closely with the Office of Community Solutions staff, and so thank you, Alex and Brenda, for your time and effort on this and your multiple rounds of review on the proffer statement, because I really think we're at a place where we had many comments from Community Solutions and really kind of parsed that down to a focus on the affordability term. So, I mean, the substantive changes were modifying the metric for the affordability standard. So from previously we had referenced 125% FMR and FMR. We changed that to 60% AMI, changed the income limits to 60% AMI, included language for a marketing plan, and just kind of really went through the list of comments to check as many boxes as we could.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just, if you oblige me, I just want to reaffirm what the last speaker noted. The the revised profile is much improved in terms of the language and the offer itself, from the previous profile that was presented to the Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, that it was or was not much improved?
It was much improved.
Was much improved, okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, one final question. I know the Office of Community Solutions also noted that the applicant noted the right to make changes to the affordable units. Is that something that staff had any concerns about?
Yeah, we just want to make sure it's in the profile, because if the developer is proposing, or owner is proposing to make a revision in the future, we want to make sure that any revisions, does not reduce the size of the affordable units. We want to make sure that the affordable units are not segregated. So it's a concern to Office of Community Solutions.
Mm-hmm. That's all I have. I guess my thoughts would be, I do think it's significantly improved from the Planning Commission meeting. I am glad to see that it is much closer to our draft inclusionary zoning ordinance in terms of the AMI levels, as well as the percentage of units within the development. But again, it's not just this development. Over and over we're seeing it, and I'll say it again, my concern is we're evaluating developments in part based on our future land use map and the greater density proposed in that, in this case perhaps arguably even greater than what will be in that, but we're not holding them accountable to the exact wording of the inclusionary zoning ordinance. And even though we're much closer here, I'm concerned that the length of affordability is dramatically different from what would be required in our inclusionary zoning ordinance. And that is my standard. If this was a development that met the draft inclusionary zoning ordinance, I would have no issues with it. I don't have issues with the level of density or the building form. But I'm just concerned continually about this weird gray area that we're in with that.
So we'll be in that until we adopt the zoning next year? I mean, hopefully by next May or June, is that?
Correct, unless we were to adopt the inclusionary zoning ordinance before the zoning rewrite. I'm not saying I know what that process looks like, but I am saying we know for a fact that if we don't start figuring out how we're going to do it, we are going to lose out on dozens and dozens, arguably over 100 if you look at the developments coming through, of deeply affordable units.
So what changes would need to be made to this, Mr. Payne, to get towards that?
This one is much, to me, this one is almost there. It's the affordability period, which is off by over 70 years from the draft inclusionary zoning ordinance.
And, one thing I will point out, I haven't had time to do the math right now again, but I've done it before. The net present value of a 20-year affordability period versus a 30-year affordability period, the difference is not much. It's not even very much when you get out to 99 years, assuming a 6% discount rate. For whatever that may be worth, I've always thought that the city would be perfectly justified in requiring a longer affordability period, recognizing that relatively small difference at, again, a 6% discount rate makes it not that much more onerous on the developer. But in any event,
and that number is obviously,
I haven't developed my position as succinctly as you have to be able to say, hey, if it doesn't meet this, then forget about it. But
fair enough, and I would just note that these numbers are based on the market analysis of the consultants. It's not just pulled out of thin air.
Right.
Yeah. So I just had a couple of comments. I can't remember if I read or you told me. Is Kelsey?
Correct.
About the height is 30. It's about 3.5 floors or 35 feet. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we're really going for a form here that can be compatible with the existing context, and so we limited the maximum height to the maximum height in the R2 zoning district. So the buildings are largely, all of them are basically 2 stories over a basement, working with the grade, with the way that the grade falls across the property.
So this church is in our neighborhood. I've been there many times. It's a wonderful church, and one of the things that this would do would give them some options in the future, as I understand it, for their property. I know that they were, that they want to have a daycare potentially in the future. I think it's been a few years since I've been there, so I know it gives them some options as well.
Yeah, definitely. When Bryce first started working with the church on this development proposal, they had the opportunity to not be part of the PUD application. And after we kind of discussed what they were hoping to do with their property, open a daycare, their basement is perfect for it, it's already outfitted for Sunday school, maybe, have some additional units and density allocated to their block in the PUD to serve as their own rental income stream, or a pastor's home, or homes for people going through transitional periods that are in their parish. So they were really on board and excited about all those opportunities, and so that's why they're an integral part of the PUD. I think we focused a lot on the on the density, on the traffic impacts, but this is also creating a tremendous opportunity for Mount View.
Okay. I had two other questions. One is, and this may not be for you, but for staff, is that we received several emails later today about maybe if this has been properly noticed. We just want to make sure that we are in line with our policies with that. And secondly, we had a call in about the connection to River Vista Street, about the connection. I guess he says it's going between, I guess, his property. Can you talk a little bit about that connection to make sure that it's safe for the residents and everyone that's using it, existing and new?
Sure. So when we started working on this project, 16, 17 months ago, and we originally had a pre-application meeting with the city and presented them with our initial concept. Of course, we anticipated there would be tremendous concerns about transportation. And so our initial concept did not show a connection to River Vista at all. And we were trying to keep we were promoting pedestrian and bike connections up through the neighborhood, but we're trying to keep all vehicular traffic concentrated towards 250. When we originally met with the city with that and with the transportation engineer, an initial feedback we got is, I want that connection to River Vista. I want multiple points of connection, because in transportation planning, you want to spread it out. You want to give people options. That's why block networks work well. You give people alternate routes. And so that was, we hear the neighbors on their transportation concerns. We fully expected that, but we're really tasked with coming up with a good development proposal that promotes interconnectivity.
Can staff, thank you.
Sure.
Talk about the notice. Are we in line with our policy?
Yes, so we are in compliance. There was no requirements. We don't have a public hearing right now for any of those notification requirements. So I did send an email out as a courtesy to let folks know who had previously provided comments that the project was having a first reading tonight. Unfortunately, that message was a bit delayed because I was out of the office and away from technology last week when the agenda got finalized. So it was a shorter notice for those folks, but it was a courtesy email, and not a formal requirement to meet.
Thank you.
Yeah, a follow-up question. To his point about the road that's going north, the outlet, or the entrance outlet, one person who was called in tonight, and I think they called in at the planning commission meeting, mentioned something about their child being close to the road, or I didn't understand that. I mean, it looks like it's on your drawing. It's a new road that will have sidewalks on one side, and I can't see how it's unsafe. It's just that there's not a road there now, but there will be.
Correct. And well, Mr. Walton lives directly adjacent to the proposed entrance off of River Vista. So
on the east or west side?
On the west side.
Okay.
Yes. And so there, there is right-of-way there. That's, you know, that right-of-way has been platted in that area for, you know, since the original River Vista plat was approved in the 40s or 50s. So I'll say, you know, that has been an established right-of-way. But correct, there's sidewalks and proposed as, you know, a barrier. We're also proposing as a part of the proffer a screening fence as well. And so I think that's also pretty integral to just creating that dividing line. And one more comment on that is just the design of how we have the two entrance points connecting between River Vista and Landonia. It's not easy for someone to just fly through there. Yeah. We went through many design iterations, and one of them was much easier for somebody just to drive through quickly, but we added angles and turns, and so to really try to slow traffic down.
If I could, Justin Champ, the engineer for the project, I only step in because the question the neighbor has, I remember the conversation, the planning commission myself, I was doing the presentation then, and I think the confusion was that initially we talked about a slope waiver to exceed the slope. That was at the Landonia entrance, I think, but there's never been a discussion about not having the full standard city entrance on the River Vista side. I think that might have been the confusion. There was a fear that would be somehow compromised, but that's never been the case. And then nor would a 13% slope in a road be anything excessive, but I think that's where that particular concern came from, but it's not in that location.
Okay. And can you tried to explain this to me a minute ago. Can you explain to me again what's happening with stormwater on the site? Is it still to be determined, basically, you're working through?
Sure. Well, we will definitively have a large underground detention system to provide full detention of the runoff. And there may or may not be a component of on-site water quality.
Got it.
There's the provision of the code allows you to do either. I've found on some of these we tend to do a portion of both, but that's the math we haven't done yet, essentially. But there will be a full accounting for the volume of runoff before it leaves the site.
All right. Which is basically you're required to do this per the state code, and it's, I guess, pretty clear. In other words, there are clear rules and criteria by which you have to decide this that aren't arbitrary.
Correct. They are very stringent, and you follow them, or the plan is, you'll never break ground until you've proven to the regulatory folks that you design meets all those requirements.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I guess unless you had
Other
questions, Mayor, but what do people think of Councilor McGill's request to have it be deferred back to the Planning Commission versus deciding on it tonight?
Well, if it was like I get the point and I respect the point. If it were like a technical question about some, you know, specific design element, I could see doing that. But the reason they rejected the proposal wasn't because of like they hated the project. They liked the project. They weren't satisfied that the affordability components, mostly the affordability pieces, were really fleshed out. And I think that they have fleshed them out with the folks on our staff. So I don't see a need to send it back. I don't know that would add any value personally.
I feel the same way.
I have a lot of sympathy for folks in the neighborhood who say, and I saw the list of changes, proffered changes. So the proffer presented to the Planning Commission was like 3 items, and the proffer presented here is like 10 or 12 items. And I have a lot of sympathy for the folks who say it's really hard to participate in this process publicly when we don't know what our target is, when we don't know what we're dealing with. And at least a couple of the people who have written to us today have said, please send it back to the Planning Commission. On the other hand, I don't know that sending it back to the Planning Commission, I mean, it's always a good thing when we have the benefit of the wisdom of folks on the Planning Commission, and I generally have a high degree of respect for the people we've appointed to the Planning Commissions, why we appointed them. I was not at the meeting. I was visiting our then month-and-a-half-old granddaughter in Michigan. I watched the meeting, but I confess I didn't get a sense of the meeting from watching it the way I would probably have gotten a sense of the meeting from having been there. And I'm frankly torn. On the one hand, as a matter of good practice, just as I don't want to be, as I said earlier, approving an ordinance, asking people to approve an ordinance that isn't absolutely nailed down. I'm a little bit leery about trying to ask folks to vote for a proposal where the proffer on the with the affordability proffer or anything else isn't entirely nailed down. I guess the question would be whether, to put the question directly to you, Councilman McGill, do you share enough of Michael's concerns about the definition of affordability so that that would be a deal breaker for you, or is your desire to have it go back to the Planning Commission based on something else?
My main desire for it to go back to the Planning Commission is they voted 6-0. That's a pretty, I mean, our entire Planning Commission, who has been known to be pretty lenient with saying yes to more density, voted 6-0 against this project. I want to make very sure that the Planning Commission really does feel this meets what they state, what their concerns were, and not infer I know what they are. For me. And that's very important to me. And I also have some further concerns about this being a PUD, and where, if this is, there's concerns here about whether or not it's really fulfilling what a PUD is really supposed to be, or if it's just a way around zoning. Because a PUD is supposed to be innovative. I'm not, and even in the staff notes, this isn't showing much innovation. So I would be much more comfortable voting yes on this if the Planning Commission felt positive about it. I mean, right now, I would be voting no about this project.
Just so again, and it's fine with me regardless of what we do, but they voted no on it because of the reasons. Because they voted no on it, the developer changed the proffer to address the concerns that were raised at that meeting. But I guess your point is you think it should go back so they see the whole thing?
Yes.
Okay. I can see that point.
So I guess as I count the votes here, it seems to me that there are definitely 2 votes for the proposal, a 3rd vote for the proposal if the affordability period is changed. Doubts here. I will tell you my concern is I would really like to see if we could convince a developer of what I believe the net present value calculations establish, that it is within their ability to give us a longer affordability period without it being, I mean, basically, once you get to 10 years, most of the cost of that affordability is in the first 10 years. It's not even in the second 20 years, and it's surely not in the next 10 years. So I guess I would, I'm not sure what I want to do.
I mean, this isn't a vote tonight.
Well,
Maybe good to give direction.
It would.
Does the developer have any feedback on the, I guess, term?
Sure. So I think that just one item to note about the term, I think, Councilor Payne, your point about, is something like the inclusionary zoning policy something that can be taken on before even the comprehensive zoning rewrite is put into place? I think, something that is policy for the development community to respond to is helpful and is well taken, because all that information is had up front when you're approaching property owners, when you're setting a price, when you're negotiating terms. This project really just got caught in the change of things, where we had the public hearing for the Planning Commission on September 13th, and the draft inclusionary zoning analysis was released a week or a week and a half before, after the advertisement had already gone out. So I feel that, we really took this application back from the Planning Commission and took their feedback and put a lot of thought and effort into that, and did everything that we possibly could, and to put forth a proffer that we felt to a good place to be as compliant with this potential future policy as we possibly could. So the timing of things is exceptionally unfortunate for this project in particular, but just to the point of the term, and to get back to your question, Councilor Pinkston, is that something that could be, and maybe this is a question for the city attorney, that could be, if it could be changed, could be rethought between the first and second reading? And if it can't be rethought, is that a public hearing process then back at the Planning Commission?
I'll let Ms. Robertson, I guess the question is, if we were to pass it on to the next meeting, this being just the first reading, but basically, if you've got the ability to count noses here, you understand that affordability may turn out to be the crucial issue. If the affordability period was increased to 30 or to 99 years, could that change be made at the second reading? Is that essentially your question?
That's my question.
Ms. Robertson, any thoughts?
So, as mentioned in City Council's agenda materials, it doesn't matter so much whether the change occurs on the first or second reading. The issue is that there's a change from what was presented at the Planning Commission meeting. And so in your agenda materials, I cited for you the city ordinance that addresses sort of how you handle that. And City Council may choose whether to keep it or to refer it back to the Planning Commission. But if you choose to keep it, then yes, you may make changes anytime prior to adopting it, so long as those changes are set out and are part of your agenda materials in accordance with the requirements of the city code provision that I cited. So what had to be presented to you tonight was a cover sheet showing the changes that have been made between the date of the Planning Commission and tonight's meeting. And what I would suggest is that if there are further changes, then an updated cover sheet should be in your agenda materials for your next meeting, also showing those further changes. So there should be a cover sheet that documents all of the changes that have happened after the date of the planning commission meeting. Does that make sense?
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Mr. Mayor, is one path through this to ask first, a vote or a show of noses or whatever about whether we want to send it back to the planning commission? Because that, to me, is like one leg of this decision tree. If we send it back to the planning commission, then all of this stuff can be, buttoned up and so forth.
Well, the other is if we moved it towards the full agenda for the next city council meeting for the second reading, anticipating changes to it, and then making a determination at that point.
Right.
Which sort of gets back to the notice question that Ms. Robertson raised, and I guess maybe I wasn't tracking exactly, but at some point, the public needs to have some idea what we're talking about before we change it and vote on it without any notice to anybody.
It sounds like what she said was that as long as we did the appropriate notice prior to the next meeting, like we would do, that would be sufficient.
So as long as the proposed changes aren't going to come from the dais next time around.
Right, right.
As long as they have been put out there ahead of time and people have an idea ahead of time
right.
what we're proposing or what we're talking about doing, that would be okay. Is that fair to say, Ms. Robertson?
Yes, and specifically, the agenda materials for the next council meeting should include an updated cover sheet prepared by the developer showing not only the proffer changes that were presented to you tonight, but adding an item showing any further changes made between tonight and the next reading.
So that the agenda packet would be put out on the 14th, and essentially what that would do is give us a week to try to figure out what additional changes might be made. As long as we got them into the agenda packet on the 14th, thereby providing public notice of what we're talking about, then we'd be on good footing?
Yes, and very specifically, I think the developer is familiar, but the provisions in the city code that address how a final proffer statement is prepared and submitted when there are changes after the commission meeting is set out in section 34-65 of the city code. So the developer should review that, as well as staff who will be preparing your agenda materials for that next meeting.
And I would say with the obvious expectation that there would be substantive changes, I would be comfortable with that.
All right. Does that
So,
sound like it?
I mean, I'm fine with it, but I thought that what I was hearing from Cena is that just, overall, that you would like to see the planning commission. Would you be, what's your thought on the approach?
I appreciate the attempt to find the flexibility space. I really feel that with a unanimous negative with the planning commission, it should go back to the planning commission to guarantee that that is what they considered being comfortable with. Also, because the planning commission did a 6-0, a lot of people who live in that area thought it was dead in the water and weren't paying attention anymore. Not necessarily that,
Yeah, so just quickly to add in as you're getting your thoughts together is that, so if it does go back to them and they review it, they have, in my opinion, substantially support this, but, with some issues. And so even if they go back and, I think that what I'm hearing from you also is that this is just not innovative enough. So no matter what they do, you may not still support it because they're not going to come back and it's going to be floating condos or anything like that, you know. So.
I mean, I voted on another PUD that wasn't as innovative as I wished it was.
But substantial, I'm just saying that they could go back and we could come back, I don't know, in a month or 2 weeks. It basically will be what you see now. It's not going to be substantially different as far as the size and the type of housing. So I just, if it goes back, I don't think that you should expect it's going to be different. I don't think so, but.
I guess your point, Councilor McGill, is if it goes back, at least we have sort of the, not the paper trail, but the sort of
that I know that
coverage or support, whatever you want to call it, of our planning commissioners.
I just, again, have a very difficult time voting positively for a project of which the entire planning commission has said no to. I really do. And I just think when that is something that happens, it should go back to them to make sure that they are comfortable with the changes and that they do feel that met their concerns.
I guess the question is, supposing they say 6-0 again, does that change how you think about?
That means I definitely won't be voting for it, because if there's 6-0 again, that means that their concerns were not met.
Okay.
And that kind of proves my point then, that we appoint this board, and part of what I'm hearing from people is that they feel that this changes and the proffers meet the concerns of the planning commission. And if it goes back to the planning commission and they vote again 6-0 against it, that means that no, the proffers are not meeting them. So that's my two biggest issues are that the planning commission voted against this 100%. They haven't had a chance to voice if they feel that this meets their concerns or not. And it signaled to many people in the community that when the planning commission voted against it 100%, that it wasn't going forward. So some people stopped paying attention as well.
As a practical matter, if this were to go back to the planning commission, how much of a delay are we talking about? Do you all know?
I mean, we would, and just one note for the record.
I'm conscious of the fact that for developers, time is money.
Right.
And I don't want to waste people's money and time unnecessarily.
Yeah, so perhaps, I don't know, Bryce, if you want to weigh in on the contracts, we've been, I'll make the comment for the record real quick that I wanted to make. So for the record, the vote was not a unanimous denial. It was a 4-1-1. So it was a 4 with the recommendation for denial, a 1 who didn't agree with that, and 1 abstention. So still a recommendation for denial, but it was a 4-1-1. So I just wanted to make sure that was included in the record, and then I'll let Bryce or Justin weigh in on the time delays.
Sure. Let me just, we've been in front of the planning commission many times, and the vibe I got at that meeting, the reason we didn't get up and ask for a deferral to change things was because their direction to us was pretty explicit, and that our response to them was yes. Basically, when it came to the terms that the community solutions looking for, we would make those proffer changes, and that we would make the change to the sidewalk on River Vista. So I think certainly had a chance to get up and ask for a deferral, but as I kind of looked at things and kind of got the read from the chair of the commission, I think they had spent 2.5 hours talking about it and felt like they had vetted it very thoroughly, and that their direction to us was good, and that several of them said something to the effect of, well, we're voting the project in front of us, and we'll vote no, but if it's changed as the applicant has said, we'd be in support. And so it's a little unusual, but I think given the nature of the issues were so well defined at the meeting, certainly our belief that they gave us direction we felt comfortable going with, and that when we got here, the commissioners who voted no will be able to look at that and say that's what we were after. Some of you all at the meeting hopefully have a similar memory, but I did contemplate asking for a deferral, as we often would, but just because their direction was so clear to us, I felt like it was unnecessary. So that's why we're here.
Is Mr. Freeze on this call?
Yes, Mayor Snook, he is being promoted to panelist.
Okay. Ms. Freeze, we're about to throw you into the mix here. Have you been listening to what we've been talking about?
I have been, yes.
Any thoughts for us?
Well, a number of thoughts. Do you want to give me a little more specific of a question? I mean, are you in terms of contemplating returning to the Planning Commission?
I guess my first question is, Mr. Schimpf has suggested that the Planning Commission had basically indicated in the course of the meeting what they thought the issues were that needed to be attended to. The suggestion now being made is because those issues have been attended to, we ought not to send it back to them because they have already basically had their input, had their influence. What do you think about that read on what the Planning Commission was doing?
I do believe that the issues were pretty well defined at the Planning Commission's level, that the Planning Commission did have a strong desire to see a stronger proffer with regard to affordable housing. And there was also concerns raised very specifically, I believe, around the sidewalk connections, which were addressed pretty clearly in the new proffer. So, I mean, I think there's some accuracy in that statement. Absolutely.
If the issue were returned to the Planning Commission, how much of a delay are we talking about before they could consider whatever they want to consider and then send it back to us?
It would go to the January Planning Commission meeting.
And so the earliest it would get to us would be February, 2 months from now.
That's correct.
With two readings still. I'll just say where I'm at again. I'm comfortable with moving it to the next meeting with the expectation that there will be substantive changes, just because I attended the Planning Commission meeting. I thought they did have very specific concerns and I understand the other perspective, especially just kind of the formality of that process, but the concerns were so specific, I feel comfortable evaluating them at the council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, me as well.
Yes.
All right.
And that's perfectly fine.
Sounds like a plan.
So
this will first reading, we'll pass it to the next meeting, by which time, hopefully in the next week, if there are additional changes, you know what the deadline is, that we've got to get those changes out there so that we can actually move forward.
And can we be a little clearer perhaps about what we're expecting with these additional changes? It sounds like the only thing is the term.
Again, to me, it's does it match the inclusionary zoning ordinance, which in this case, what doesn't match it is the length of affordability.
Okay. I personally feel like they have a good point in terms of the fact that where their development fell in the middle of all this time frame.
I hear it. I know we've discussed it before, but the flip side of it is we're evaluating approving this the same way in terms of what's entering in our minds of why I should approve this is the not yet completed zoning update and the density increase is contemplated in that. So if we're
your point,
we should be, if we're going to consider that, we should consider inclusionary zoning. Otherwise,
your point is that in terms of the density of this, it's similar to what's in the FLOM.
Above it, actually.
Okay. And so given that, if we're following along that line, we should also be willing to follow to be consistent.
Correct. And
Okay.
they shouldn't be able to, if they're going to be evaluated on one thing, they shouldn't get an excuse on the affordability component.
That's helpful to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Just want to acknowledge how riveting that conversation was for the community.
motion.
Are you okay with moving forward to the next, or you want to be a?
I want to be a no.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So
There
you
needs
need
to be
a
a motion.
you want to make a motion to move it to the next meeting?
Y'all help me. Yeah, I move that we move this proposed resolution to our next meeting with the proviso that there will be at least some changes to the proffers that we will see prior to that meeting that will be publicly noticed and so forth.
And also to move the sidewalk waiver.
And
It
also,
doesn't make any sense to take the sidewalk waiver up today if we're not going to.
that's fine.
Yeah.
And to
Okay.
and to move the sidewalk waiver as well. You need two separate votes? Those are two separate pieces? Okay.
One motion to defer, I think.
A motion to
Is there a
defer.
second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Thomas, take the vote.
Counselor McGill?
No.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
All right. Let's figure this thing out.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so that takes care of both number 10 and number 11. You okay, just standing up and stretching, or do you need a break?
No, I'm fine if you.
Okay.
Let's keep powering forward.
Let's move it along. Number 12, Mr. Anthony, are you with us to talk about Washington Park Pool?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Rian Anthony, Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation Department. A quick summary of the appropriation memo in front of you. Parks and Recreation has budgeted for 4 turf fields and lights installation at the Darden Tower Park, which was funded and appropriated in FY20. This capital improvement plan is a joint project funded by the city and the county. And the county has not approved this project. Recent discussions with the county have confirmed that they will not be moving forward with this funds. What staff would like to do is reallocate $350,000 and to move it to a Washington Park project. And that project will be occurring the resurfacing of the pool and upgrading some amenities at the Washington Park pool. If you have any further questions, I can take your questions.
I guess it is about time for the.
I was just curious, when was the last time it was resurfaced? It felt like it was just yesterday, but.
The last time it was resurfaced was in 2010. There has been some cracks and some surfacing. We have to repaint almost every year. What staff has decided was to, in order to fix the problem, is to resurface the entire pool.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. To me, this seems pretty straightforward, and quite frankly, looking at the level of community use, and this seems like an even better project. Not to hit on Darden Tower, but this seems like arguably an even better project, so I'm happy to support it.
I'll hate on
Okay.
AstroTurf.
All right, so this is one of 2 readings. Do we agree that we're going to pass it to the next meeting for a second reading on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anthony.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next resolution expressing support for a capital project to establish handicapped access to the Charlottesville Dogwood Vietnam Memorial. Mr. Eads, I guess, couldn't stick it out any longer. But Mr. Sanders, your face is there, but it tells us that Ms. Robertson is presenting.
Yeah, we worked it out earlier today that I'm going to take it and I'll call her when I need help.
Fire away.
So the item before you is in regards to the Dogwood Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Just reminding council, just from a little history, this was the first civic public memorial in the U.S. to honor those who served and made the ultimate sacrifice protecting our country. The memorial was resituated after the construction project that is the John Water Parkway. There have been many, many discussions over the years. I joined that discussion this summer, bringing forward an opportunity for the veterans to be able to share an update as to their interest in wanting to push forward a parking lot and pedestrian bridge to connect the memorial to adequate ADA facilities. We've had additional conversations since then, trying to get everything squared away in regards to maintenance and maintaining the memorial as a long-term amenity, as well as getting this next section of a project done, which is the parking lot and the bridge. We brought before you, Ms. Robertson brought before you the Public-Private Education Facilities and Infrastructure Act item last month for you to adopt as a process by which public-private partnerships for the city of Charlottesville will follow. We are suggesting that this is a perfect example of the type of project that should be set up to use that. So this will be our first one we're teeing up for you. It is our intention that we would take this project through that process. What it does is that it basically qualifies the project in a way, giving it credibility so that the veterans can do their fundraising efforts, which is one of their big concerns at this moment, is that it's a concept. And by taking it forward and actually pursuing the PPEA, it codifies it as a viable project with the support of council. Tonight, we're asking you to approve a resolution indicating your interest in moving forward with us being able to figure out exactly how to go about doing this, which would include putting together that packet and putting it out for public bid. Ideally, what we would imagine to do is to just continue to support the veterans in their efforts to make this project happen. They, amongst themselves, have made contact with Senator Deeds, who has indicated that there is a possibility that there may be state funding available that he might be willing to pursue. We're not exactly sure if that's going to be possible for this next session, but it may be something that he would continue to be able to work on while they are actively engaged in a capital campaign. And then we will be doing the PPEA work in the meantime. So ideally, that would be where we are as a progress report and a status update at this time. This feels like the best way for us to move forward. And with passing this resolution, it would actually indicate to the veterans that we too are serious about supporting them and seeing this come to pass.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Sanders?
First of all, thank you, Sam and Lisa, for all of your hard work on getting this to this point. One of the things that hopefully people have had a chance to read through the resolution, I think it's pretty clear, but one of the real goals of doing this is to basically make a statement, that the city values this memorial and values doing what it takes to make the memorial accessible, and also to give essentially a connection point for potential funds from the General Assembly or some other source that State Senator Deeds is working on. So I support this resolution 100%. I hope others will as well.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I think it's a very creative approach to try to make this work, and also hopefully maybe a good model for future projects. I do believe in being honest, and I do think it remains a significant challenge for the city to singularly fund this project, but I think this provides a viable, real path forward to try to get funding from the General Assembly and private philanthropy and have the city still support it materially in terms of staff. So,
yep,
agreed. Well said.
So, I'll just say I know that Mr. Eads has now returned. But I had earlier said, "Oh, you must have given up on us." So
not after all this time he has.
He stuck it out and came back. That's okay. And so I know that he's been in touch with Councilor Pinkston in particular in trying to work on this, and we've generally had a pretty good sense of, yes, this is something we wanted to try to accomplish. But seemed to be, every time we turned around, there seemed to be one more little something in the way. It's almost an accident of history that this memorial wound up getting cut off from parking, and it's something that probably was a mistake that was made 7 or 8 years ago. But it's time to see if we can't find a way to rectify it.
Yeah. I want to thank the folks from the Dogwood always get this, not quite, Dogwood Vietnam Memorial Foundation and all of the good work that they've done. Also, former Mayor Tom Vandiver has been very involved in this, and again, Lisa Robertson and Sam. So I'm happy to make the resolution, the motion.
All right.
Okay.
So, did you already make the motion?
I have not.
Okay.
I move the resolution expressing support for a capital project to establish handicapped access to the Charlottesville Dogwood Vietnam Memorial.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. Thomas, take the vote.
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming into the home stretch. Next is we've got a discussion of the TJPDC proposed legislative positions. Mr. Blunt is with us by video. Yes, sir. Fire away.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for your time this evening. I'm here to present the regional legislative program for 2023 for your approval. The other member governing bodies in the region have approved, so you all are taking the last whack at it. I would like to spend just a couple of minutes going over the 3 top priority items in the proposed program, and then also speak very briefly as well to some of the particular changes in the legislative positions section of the program. Those changes, as well as the entirety of the program, are included in your meeting packet. The top priority heading into 2023 is public education funding. It's back on top this year, and we found that state funding support for K-12 education really continues to be the top issue that resonates across all the localities in the region. In this particular position, requests that the state fully fund its share of the realistic cost of the standards of quality. The second priority item is titled Budgets and Funding, and this is what I have called the perennial we support increased aid to localities. We do not want unfunded mandates, and we want you to preserve local revenue authorities, and that is the thrust of that position. And then the third priority is on broadband, and this position statement really just emphasizes general support for state and federal efforts to expand broadband access in unserved locations. As I said, the legislative positions section follows the priority items. It really focuses on the most critical recommendations and positions that are in areas other than those priority areas, but that are also of interest and of concern in the region. I just wanted to pick out a few to emphasize from the list of changes that were in your packet, because several of them really correlate to some of the things that you all have included in your local position statement. Concerning school facilities, in the education section, there's a new statement that expresses support for the school construction assistance programs that were enacted during this past General Assembly session, and requesting that they continue to be consistently funded. This is also the position where we continue to have language that was put in at your request last year that supports localities having the option to levy a 1-cent sales tax for school construction and renovation of its facilities. The general government section, there's a new bullet point to support funding for localities for cybersecurity to protect critical systems and sensitive data. And also in the general government section, as well as in the land use section, I wanted to point out there are existing positions that we've maintained that have strong support for local authority related to internet-based businesses. This is your short-term rentals positions. In the housing position, there's some new language to put some additional emphasis on incentives and local authority to promote housing that is affordable. And then finally, I'll mention a couple. We had a number of new bullets proposed in the public safety section. Did want to mention 2 of those. One is to urge state assistance to localities in recruiting and retaining law enforcement personnel, a problem that's being faced all across our region and in many parts of the state. And also, again, an existing position, but really language to support policies that reduce the time that officers must spend handling mental health detention orders. And then I will mention there's a new position statement, and I believe this is consistent with it's contained in the VML statement as well as the Virginia First City statement. Legislation to help law enforcement combat the act of make-us call. This is commonly referred to as swatting. Those are the items I wanted to point out to you. Certainly glad to discuss any with you. And then I am requesting that you vote to adopt the program this evening.
Any clarifying questions, council?
Just one question / thought is the top priority makes up most of the policies I'm okay with. There's just one under general government bullet point. The state should maintain the principles of sovereign immunity for local governments and their employees. I know I believe there's been some conversation around concerns of that with VML's positions. And it's just that one bullet item I don't really feel saying I sign on to and support because of the issues around accountability of public employees who have committed misconduct.
Say that I'm not a fan of sovereign immunity in my private law practice. It'd be hypocritical of me to now say, gee, I want to be supporting it while I'm here on council.
What does it offer, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Payne? And I believe there's another position, regional program, which the city's local position state particularly note where your position differs than that, JPDC. I believe that's related to Chesapeake Bay preservation. So if it was the will of council, you could certainly treat this position similarly with your local legislative program.
So logistically, what does that mean?
Well, I guess the first question is whether, since we're actually taking votes, one is whether we endorse the TJPD proposed legislative positions, and I suppose we could take a vote that says we endorse their positions except for the position on sovereign immunity and except for the position on Chesapeake Bay, or I what that other issue was.
Yeah. You could fashion it that way if you'd like. I mean, the legislative program is a guide developed by the limits for me and the legislative team to use in lobbying General Assembly members. Right. So certainly if the city was to this position and the bill came forward, then that position accurately represented as to what you all have adopted or approved.
So the paragraph dealing with Chesapeake Bay says we oppose legislation mandating expansion of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act's coverage area.
I believe that is the statement.
That we object
and I believe your
we disagree
city
with.
Notes that.
Yeah. So I mean, we could pass a resolution endorsing the package except for those things.
Okay.
Council?
I'm good with that.
I move that we adopt the resolution or adopt the package put together, save for items mentioned.
Sovereign immunity and Chesapeake Bay preservation.
Yeah, from the Tom Planning District Commission legislative package.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second that.
Any discussion? Ms. Thomas, take the vote, please.
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Blunt.
Yes, thank you.
And last item is our own proposed legislative positions, and this is the basically compilation. We have two things. First is the one-pager of the top priorities, and then is the 10-pager. And the 10-pager represents essentially everybody's wish list, all of the various people who have said anything to us in the last 2 months. And so we've got that list, and then we've got the 9 items that I thought were the things that we have all, and this is something that Councilor McGill and I spent a fair amount of time kind of, how can we get down to 1 page? Because we were at 2 pages, 18 items, and that just seemed ridiculous to say we had 18 priorities. So down to 1 page. And these are basically items that we have all, at some point, dais said something in the last year about we could do something else. And these items that I think meet those criteria.
I would like to say that Ms. Fraley was correct.
Yes.
J, 7, and 9 are pretty much the exact same, so I would suggest that we...
Was it a typo or just an oversight?
It's an
They're
oversight.
worded
You-
differently, but if you look at them, you realize they're really saying the same thing.
And we're reading this thing over and over and over again, it blends. So I recommend that we,
Number 9.
yeah.
Okay. Good with the priorities designated.
It all looks good to me. Thank you for the work.
Yeah, I'm glad that y'all tackled this.
I think realistically, it's kind of like the number 1, just school funding, number 1.
Funding is number 1, everything else is number 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the one change that we're going to take out, paragraph, what was it, J9?
J9.
J9. We can, I don't see any reason we can't vote on both the priorities and overall positions in the same vote.
Brooks, do you have, I know we didn't give you a ton of time to read it. Do you have any concerns regarding our legislative position?
No, I think they are just fine.
Thank you.
A motion.
I'm to adopt the Charlottesville City Council Statement of Legislative Position for the 2023 Regular General Assembly Session with the amendment of Section J, Article 9, due to it being a duplicate, and move that we accept the priority position of that.
Page 3 of the packet.
223 of the packet.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Thomas?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
All right, passes 5-0. Are there other business items for consideration? Nothing else on the agenda. Councilors, any questions for city management to follow up on? I had told them that I was going to follow up on this question about bike lanes on West Main Street, and Mr. Sanders said, I'm going to solve that problem early on in the meeting. We're going to talk about it quick. So, all right, I guess there's nothing further. So we are now at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers be given up to 3 minutes. You may join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar, by pressing *9 if you've joined by phone, or there's nobody here in council chambers to raise your hand. So anyway, any virtual speakers wish to address us?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands. Actually, well, one has, yes, Marcia Geyer.
All right, Ms. Geyer?
You are on with council.
I just wanted to say thank you for the selection of the new chief of police. And I'm glad that the acting chief of police will be welcome to continue, because he obviously really, really cares. That's important.
Yes, he is. Thank you, Ms.
That's
Geyer.
it.
Thank you.
There are no additional hands.
All right. There being no additional hands, we have nothing else to talk about. So we're adjourned.
We are.
Thank you all.